as one who will be running for re-election in 2022, I need results that I can show the American people.
And there ought to be a clear message to my party and all those who support it, get the job done.
This week, we are breaking down the battle for the U.S. Senate. Let's just start at the highest level with what is at stake next year.
So what's at stake is control of the Senate, of course. It's 50-50 right now. Republicans need to gain just one more seat. So there are 34 states with Senate elections. 20 of those are Republicans, 14 Democrats. And of those, there's about 7 that are really competitive. What's good for Democrats is they aren't defending seats in any state that Trump won. Now, that being said, just because Biden won a state doesn't mean he won it by a large majority. But the environment is certainly, at least at this point a year out, is favorable to Republicans.
Let's look a little bit more closely at the 7 most competitive states.
So the breakdown in the most competitive races is that you have Pennsylvania and North Carolina, where Republicans are retiring. So it's open seats, everyone's jumping in. In Wisconsin, we don't have a clear decision yet from Ron Johnson, but it appears like he is running. Ron Johnson is a very much like red meat Republican who's going after like anti-vax issues, things like that. So he could have some problems in a general there if he does decide to run for re-election. And then you have Nevada, New Hampshire, Georgia, Arizona, states where there are all vulnerable Democrats, incumbents who are seeking re-election there. Definitely pick up opportunities for Republicans in those states.
Come on up here, Herschel Walker, come up here. I know he will go down also as one of the greatest senators in America. So Herschel, please say a few words.
Trump has been very active in these Republican Senate primaries, and it's really set the tone of those primaries. It's caused a lot of mudslinging. And so the question right now is, are Republicans going to internalize this lesson, I guess you could call, that they learned in Virginia? Is it going to change how candidates want Trump or not to interact with the races? There's no indication that Trump's involvement is going to change.
None of the vulnerable Democratic senators are the ones in Washington who are giving Biden a hard time on the larger reconciliation bill. They don't seem to be, doing a mansion or a cinema.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. That in Arizona, it's a state where Mark Kelly is going to have to thread the needle on support for Biden and appealing to moderate Republicans and the many independents in that state. He's not the vocal Arizona senator who is pushing back on Democrat spending, things like that. And that's something that Republicans have pointed out. They're saying, well, he's just a lapdog for Schumer. And so that's kind of a talking point you'll hear from Republicans in that case.
How have both sides done on recruiting the top candidates that they want in these races?
Recruiting for Republicans is something that is maybe a problem this year. Some of the front-running candidates in these competitive states, these swing states, are Republicans with some problems. We've seen, Republican leadership all rallying around Herschel Walker, but these are the same people who were concerned just a few months ago about what it meant that his ex-wife said that he held a gun to her head and threatened to blow her brains out. And then, of course, in Pennsylvania, there's the question of, is the Trump-endorsed front-running candidate there going to be able to continue in the race if he potentially loses custody of his children in this ongoing battle? And then, of course, in Missouri, the frontrunner there, Eric Greitens, he is a former governor who had to resign in disgrace. And so these are not necessarily people that are going to have an easy time in a general election due to all the baggage.
What about fundraising?
For the most part, Democratic incumbents in these swing states, these competitive states, are outraising their Republican opponents. There's a lot of involvement from outside super PACs. And in general, Democrats are much better at grassroots digital kind of fundraising than Republicans are. And that can make a big difference.
I know it's early, but what are the issues that are driving the primaries on both sides?
Well, certainly for Democrats, it has been, we are the ones who are competent enough to solve the pandemic crisis. And that's something that Republicans certainly have pushed back on and saying, like, look at the state of the country right now. Most people say it's going in the wrong directions. But of course, Democrats touting vaccines to children, and of course, infrastructure bill as well, and to put in place mandates that require people to come around and get a vaccine, which is what will lead to the end of the pandemic. For Republicans, it's been, like blasting Democrats for things like the Afghanistan response and crime in cities. And Democrats want to defund the police, blaming the current state of education on Democrats being in office, and pointing to the fact that many voters think that schools are not in a good place right now, not just on the critical race theory issue, but just student performance in general. Of course, having had so many schools closed for so long during the pandemic, also inflation and rising prices, things like that.
Is there a race to the kind of really fringy right on election fraud and COVID and some of this other stuff that Trump has pushed?
We really haven't seen election integrity being one of the issues that Republicans are blasting in their ads and things like that against each other. That's an issue that is a little bit tricky, and they also want people to turn out. And so that's kind of a little bit tougher one to use while you're running for office and want people to go out and vote for you.
Yeah. So one of the lessons of Georgia was, don't tell your voters that it's all fraudulent and made up, because they might not show up at the polls.
Probably not so much. Yeah.
All right, Natalie, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ryan.